Hi everyone, and thank you for joining the July 2023 VMware TAM customer webinar. This webinar is run by the VMware TAM organisation to provide our customers the opportunity to hear great content and interact directly with VMware experts, with the goal of making sure that you're getting the full benefit from your software. Before we get into today's content, there are just a couple of basic announcements. This webinar is being recorded and your TAM can make the recording link available to you. After a few months, the recording will be publicly available on the VMware TAM Services YouTube channel, which you can access using the QR code or URL in the top right of this slide. We want you to benefit from these sessions by interacting with the speaker, so if you have any questions during today's webinar, please do use the Q&A feature of Zoom and we will address these during the webinar. If your question doesn't get answered today, please be sure to reach out to your TAM and ask them to follow up. At the end of today's session, you will be prompted to fill out a simple survey related to the value you received from this session and any topic suggestions for future sessions. Your completion of the survey is a really valuable gift back to us, so we'd really appreciate if you could take the time to fill it in. And lastly, our next TAM customer webinar will be on August 10th, where we will hear all about the great benefits of the Oracle Cloud VMware solution. So that brings us to today's webinar, where we are joined by Senior Client Services Engineer, Bart Burnett. Bart, over to you.
Thank you, Amy. Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Bart Burnett. I'm a Senior Client Services Engineer and I'm part of VMware Internal IT. Our team, or my team, manages Horizon desktops and apps that are delivered to all VMware colleagues internally. So what I prepared for you is our migration story to modern management platform, as we call it. And here is a very broad agenda for today's session. So we're going to start with a brief overview of our all production environments, just to give you an idea of the scale of the environments that whole VMware IT is managing. Then we're going to dive into the virtual environments and focus on desktop use cases. Then we'll just take a look at some of our deployments, day two operations, and lessons learned. And I'll make sure that we have some time for Q&A also. Same time, if you have any short questions, feel free to put them into the Q&A chat. So we'll try to address some of them as we go through the presentation. Any longer questions, we may have to keep to the last, just like Amy mentioned. Right. So with that, I'll just start with this very busy slide. This depicts the size of all IT estate managed by different teams we would normally consider IT. So it includes our data center and InfoSec teams. So I'll give you just a few seconds to go through this slide in your time. While you going through the slide, I'm just going to mention that the Horizon deployment numbers are also part of this slide, just combined, and there's going to be an extra slide just focusing on Horizon when I discuss some more numbers in detail. One more note before I move to the next slide is, so if you'd like to hear more about any of those areas that we mentioned here on the very first slide, feel free to reach out to your TAM or your account manager, and they can get in contact with one of our VMware on VMware product owners to discuss this on either one-to-one basis or schedule a similar type of seminar or webinar, should I say. Right. With that, we're just going to quickly jump into some of our virtual desktop use cases. So internally, Horizon desktops have been used in VMware for over a decade. Initially, when we started around 2007, we rolled out Horizon to a small R&D community. Very quickly, we noticed that there's a value in it, and we expanded to our corporate colleagues. So practically since 2008, continuously, our corporate colleagues have been using Horizon since. And it has become a full-fledged desktop replacement for many of the business units. So when a new colleague starts in VMware, usually their manager can can decide if they wish to procure a laptop for them, or they just provide a virtual machine, which is Horizon Desktop. Another big use cases for us is bring your own device. So there will be situations where, due to various reasons, either employee choice or maybe lack of hardware temporarily, or you have to use unmanaged device, so basically not VMware own device. So we would all consider this as bring your own. And in all those situations, Horizon would be provided as a means of secure access to VMware internal resources. As of now, we are not allowing any unmanaged devices to access any VMware internal resources. So you either have to have managed device or you have to use Horizon. Another interesting use case is actually mergers and acquisitions. So these are the situations where you have a large number of employees being on board in a very short period of time. So normally that would put a lot of stress on your deployment team, if you wish to call them this way. So IT staff that prepare laptops, image laptops. With being able to provide Horizon desktops for those colleagues being onboarded on day one, we take the stress off the deployment team. So then what may happen is deployment team can slowly go through the list of colleagues and work individually with those colleagues to either have laptop reimage or reissue new machine. This can be spread across through longer period of time. And the main benefit of it is, all the employees joining on day one have full access to VMware resources, so that they are productive from day one. Similar use case is actually contractors and temporary workers. So again, most of the time those colleagues would work from maybe a third-party site, sometimes from home. Again, maybe bring your own device. We wouldn't really control their hardware. It wouldn't be a managed device. So we would request all those colleagues to use Horizon. One extra benefit with using Horizon here is keeping in mind that workforce may require some additional restrictions when it comes to access to VMware network. We can easily apply NSX rules on the subnet where virtual machines reside, or just using Horizon smart policies, we can limit the level of access that colleagues have and what they can access. So this is actually a great story when it comes to securing your intellectual property and working with contractors. Other interesting use cases are actually branch offices. So VMware has many offices across the globe, but not all offices have IT presence. So there may be a situation where you're sitting in a small office with no physical IT person available, and if, for instance, your laptop breaks, it may take that day or two to ship that laptop or get a loaner. Very often what help desk will do in this situation is they will just provide a temporary Horizon desktop to that colleague so they can continue to be productive while the machine is being fixed. Okay, with that, we're just going to dive a little bit deeper into the use cases in action. The reason I have this very similar slide is to explain how and why we run Horizon Desktop in a certain way. So the good example is actually two first use cases for business application and finance colleague. When we deploy Horizon desktops and apps, there's usually two ways we do it. We place the desktops closer to end user or closer to the backend application. The reason for it is to get the best user experience. So there will be situations where by placing desktops as close to big hubs of our users, we minimize the latency, and thanks to that, their overall user experience is very good. There will be some other situations, like usually it's for finance, some of our order management teams, where the applications or the backend applications, the backend server applications that would reside in different data center or even different region, where comparing to where the users are. So what that would mean is the latency between, let's say, your client device and let's say, for instance, maybe Oracle server or sub server is fairly high. So trying to run a large report over a long distance, it's just a time-consuming process. So what we would normally do, we would place Horizon desktops under the same roof as the backend application and minimize the latency there. So overall user experience would still improve because those reports would run much quicker. Another interesting use case is actually our developers. So we have two large groups of developers using our Horizon desktops. We call them front-end and back-end developers. So some of them will be developing the tools that are being used internally, like maybe Salesforce or SAP related, and the backend developers. These are the colleagues that actually work on VMware code, VMware products that are being then shipped to customers. For instance, some of those products would be NSX or Workspace ONE. Last interesting use case I wanted to share with you is the top bottom right corner. It's the system admins and secure workstation. This is very similar to Microsoft Privileged Access Workstation solution, where we actually place a bunch of virtual machines in a separate subnet, secure it using NSX microsegmentation. We also add some two-factor authentication, and we only allow the access from internal. And what we do then further is colleague that logs into a VM and then that subnet has I suppose, open access to manage portions of our internal infrastructure. And you wouldn't be able to do it from laptop. Only certain VLANs or subnets, should I say, are allowed to be able to perform certain management tasks. So this would be some of the ways we kind of secure ourselves here. Okay, with that, I'm just going to move to next slide, which is a very quick overview of our global presence. So as you can see, we have a few different data centers here. How I like to explain this slide is if you look from the bottom, there's three kind of light green bubbles. They will be our on-premises capacities, and the blue ones are the cloud-based. So as you can see, we're actually mainly based on premises at the moment, and most of our deployments are actually Horizon 8. The cloud capacities is a mixed bunch. So the top left corner, the blue one, is actually it's Horizon Cloud on Azure, and then the blue/green cloud inside a bubble is VMware Cloud on AWS. So VMC deployment, but it has Horizon 8 stack deployed on it. And you may be asking why did we do it in AWS? And the reason for it is this. So because we deployed Horizon 8 in AWS, so we can actually join it to the same cloud pod architecture. So as you can see, all Horizon 8 deployments, regardless if they're in the cloud or they're on premises, they are all actually joined to a single CPA. So that achieves multiple goals. When it comes to end user experience, we only ever have to give all colleagues, regardless of the region, a single URL. So there's no chance to go wrong. And then based on the colleague's location, the CPA is going to sort users' access to the closest data center. So they're always going to get the best user experience. When it comes to IT admin, we effectively create what you could call active DR site. So each of those deployments is an active DR site for each other. So how we scale our environments is we always keep certain buffer of capacity available. So in case any of the remaining data centers was temporarily unavailable, we can fail over existing sessions to any other data center, spread the load. So anyone is going to get their virtual machine and they can continue the work. Now, before I move to next slide, you probably noticed at the very top, the URL for cloudhorizonvmware.com or cloud control plane, as we call it now, Universal Console. So all our environments are actually plugged in using Cloud Connector to Universal Console, and we use this console for licensing and also monitoring. We also use some of the reporting capabilities of Cloud Control Plane. Okay. Another interesting thing is, so we do much more than just CPI you saw in previous slide, right? So, and this is what you see here. In case colleague has to roam between different sites, we want to make sure that their user experience doesn't suffer. So the look and feel between environments should be the same. They should be productive from minute one they log into different environment. I would say even further, they shouldn't even realize they're actually logged into a different site. And how we do it is, we have a few technologies, including App Volumes, Dynamic Environment Manager, and we actually replicate user settings, so Dynamic Environment Manager settings and App Volumes, app stacks across all environments. So regardless which environment you're going to connect to, your experience is going to be consistent. You're going to get the same, you're going to get your settings, and the applications that you have assigned, they're going to roam with you. They're going to be assigned regardless of the site as well. I'm just quickly checking the Q&A chat here, but so far no questions. Right. This is just taking us a little bit deeper into the actual, I suppose, the horizon design and how we set up our environments. So probably even though it's a very busy slide, what you're going to notice very quickly is the big bubble or AWS pod and on-premises pod, the smaller one, that they're fairly similar. They're practically the same. So the reason for it is, regardless of if we deploy Horizon 8 in the cloud or on premises, we practically use the same design. So it's like a cookie cutter. We just do another, and it just makes things easier because our design is across the board is the same. It makes things easier when it comes to naming patterns, the setups, deployment teams knows exactly what to do, and it just becomes quicker. One interesting thing that you may notice here, and not everyone does it, and I like to point it out, is if you look at AWS pod and I suppose smaller rectangle inside with the internal sites, you have two sets of UAGs. One that sits just behind the VIP UA, the actual VIP, and then another one just before. So regardless if it's internal or external, you're going to see the UAGs, right? So I suppose the key takeaway here is, normally if you look at the Horizon design, people will set up the UAGs only for external access, right? Not necessarily set them up for internal access. Our use case is slightly different here. What we're doing is we're always tunneling blast protocol traffic. Some time back, we were using connection servers to tunnel blast protocol traffic for internal, and for external, it had to be UAGs. But what we found is, every time it came to monthly patching, we would either have to look at lean hours or weekends to do the patching on those Windows servers, because there were always some active sessions going through those connection servers. So when it comes to one side, the IT staff availability versus the maintenance windows you have available to you, there wasn't too much time to actually achieve it. So what we said is, let's just cut the dependency from Windows patching and move the traffic tunneling into the UAGs, just like we do for external. By doing so, we don't have dependency on Windows server or connection servers anymore to tunnel the traffic. So we can actually, we have more options to do the Windows patching for those VMs now, because all the traffic goes through UAGs, regardless if it's internal or external. And even if you disable temporarily, portions of your connection servers to do Windows patching, it's okay. There is no user impact. Okay. Now, I'm just going to quickly shift to talk about user experience. So as you can see, we have different format, different size, different screen size and the different type of devices, and they're all using the same portal, which is our Workspace ONE Access. So we market the Workspace ONE Access as internally, I should say, to all our colleagues as one-stop shop for all the resources. So when colleague starts in VMware, we just say, just remember this one URL, and then all the resources that are assigned to you will be available there with SSO enabled. So this is the beauty of Workspace ONE Access. And the good thing about this solution is, regardless of the device format, if you bookmark something, it's just going to be there. It's very easy to find and it's intuitive. And we publish a lot of desktops and applications in Workspace ONE Access. And depending on the size of device, colleagues may prefer something different to use. For instance, if you're working with a large screen, most likely colleagues will tend to use virtual machines because you have a lot of space. But as the screen size reduces, we notice a lot of colleagues tend to use just Horizon apps instead directly. So they will just launch Outlook or maybe just a Chrome browser for a secure access to some resources. And we're not really limiting anyone to access any of this. So generic desktops and browsers plus Office applications are available to all VMware colleagues in VMware. So we actually call it a birthright access. So as soon as your AD account is created, there is a few dynamic security groups that will make sure that you're basically entitled to those applications. So you'll land in one of those groups. Based on your region, it may be different group. And then you get access to Horizon desktops and apps. And then it's really up to colleagues if they decide to use it or not. We give a choice. In the end, we want to make sure that whatever set of tools they decide to use, they're the most productive. Okay. Okay, I'm just reading one of the questions. Okay, Nandish, so your question about the version of Workspace ONE Access on-premise, when it comes to versions and the life cycle, I suppose you can work with your TAM team to get the clarification from the product team directly. I wouldn't be in the position to answer this question. Okay. Right. With that, let's move to virtual desktop structure. So the whole user experience I discussed so far is delivered thanks to the technologies you see here on the screen. What we found is that colleagues, if they use desktop, not RDSH apps, they're looking for a persistent desktop experience. And what that usually means is, every time they log in, desktop looks and feels the same. So, whatever changes they made since since the last session, it's going to persist. If they installed any applications, they're going to be there. Any adjustment to the software, it's going to stay. Right, and to do that, from IT perspective, we want to do it in the way that we meet the mark, right? Most of our environments are actually instant clone floating environments, which by nature they're not really persistent, right? So what we would do, we would apply all those technologies on user login to make sure that their desktop looks and feels persistent. Most of our desktop pools are Windows 11, so during logon, we would probably start from DEM that would start applying user settings, and that includes your, if you mapped any drives, any folder redirections, everything is going to be applied. Same time, we're going to attach your FSLogix container. FSLogix container, it's actually not VMware, it's Microsoft's product. We're using it to cache Outlook and OneDrive files. So we found that if we don't keep OST cached for Outlook, Outlook tends to work slower. And when it comes to OneDrive, all our virtual machines, so when you log in first time, they will actually come configured with OneDrive. So you're just going to get a pop-up saying that, hey, OneDrive is ready for you. Just click OK to acknowledge, and it's going to start syncing. So it's just to give everyone a bit of capacity so they can cache the files they use the most. And lastly, there's a portion for app volumes, app stacks or packages. So these are the IT prepackaged and delivered applications. And writable volume, this is the disk that allows colleagues to install their own applications and persist between sessions. So all this will attach and apply during login, and by the time a colleague sees their desktop, it just looks exactly as when they left it last session. Okay. Now, here's a bit info about some of the setups we run internally and the spec of virtual machines. So as you can see, we use multiple technologies you've seen in previous slide, and there may be different combinations of these technologies. You may ask what dictates how those types of desktops, and the answer is our use cases. So depending on your role in organization and the level of persistency or what you're using your desktop for, we may require only certain number or all technologies to deliver experience you're expecting, right? And that's why you see type 1, where we only have Windows, DM, and FSLogix. Usually it's kind of lightweight deployment for maybe people who work mainly with SaaS-based applications, or browser-based applications, maybe like Salesforce and Outlook, and they don't really need anything beyond this, just being a desktop really, quick and responsive, nothing else. And then there may be people that require very business unit specific applications that we deliver using app volumes, or maybe they wish to install their own applications, and that's what you see in type 3. Beyond Windows, we also provide Ubuntu and CentOS. When it comes to specs, we give a choice of 3 types of virtual machine spec. 90% of our colleagues use the Platinum. So this is kind of our go-to setup for most of our colleagues. So 4 vCPU, 16 gigs of RAM. And then performance, a bit bumped RAM, usually for colleagues from finance or some other departments. Maybe if they work with heavy Excel sheets, Power BI, they benefit from extra RAM. And then Performance Pro is actually reserved only for our R&D community. So our backend developers, I mentioned at the beginning, they would use the VMs of this spec to work on the code. Okay. All right. A few words on security and Horizon Smart Policies. So I did mention NSX in the past, right? But I just wanted to spend a few minutes talking about smart policies. This is something we use heavily, and the policies available to I suppose Horizon admin are enough, to secure your Horizon desktops to the level that a colleague has to perform all their work within the virtual environment, right? So based on maybe a colleague's location, so if they connect externally versus internal, or they may be member of certain security group, we may be applying additional security restrictions to limit their access and interactions between the client machine and virtual machine. So for instance, if colleagues are accessing Horizon externally, we don't really have a trust of that device, so we would practically lock down everything. We wouldn't allow any file transfers, attaching USB devices. You wouldn't be able to copy and paste. And we would also optimize BLAST protocol slightly different, because we assume if you connect externally, chances are you may be on poorer internet connection. And then if you're connecting externally, we assume, okay, you may be on VPN, or you're actually in the VMware office, so there's a certain level of trust we can afford. And then, maybe we would allow bi or one directional copy and paste, maybe some printing, drag and drop, and different optimization for this display protocol. Okay. Now, and this takes us to day 2 operations. So again, a fairly busy slide. I try to mention the most common things that Horizon admin deals with on daily basis. One of the probably most common things is actually image management, right? So depending on the size of your environment and depending on the number of the images, you may be spending more or less time here. For us, we have fairly sizable environments, so it does take a bit of time. Because we've been running Horizon for so long, we developed certain processes and in-house tools to help us automate certain of those things. So in general, when it comes to maintaining the image and testing the image and then releasing the image to production, we would have 3 types of environments, first of all. So we would have early adopters environments that get all the latest and greatest, very often even pre-GA versions of Horizon software, and also the latest updates for Windows and software. So we would put it there. We would have it run for a period of time and gather feedback. Depending on the type of the change in the image, that would be available there for shorter or longer period. After that, if we're nearing the production rollout, we would actually use that image to push into a UAT. A UAT would be pretty much a smaller version of your production setup. This is just to make sure there isn't any unexpected outcome while you're actually pushing this into production. And then if everything is okay, thumbs up, we would just schedule activity and push it to production. So for us, it's kind of 3-stage process where we would first push a change to early adopters, then UAT, and then production. This actually helps with filtering any unexpected behaviors or something that may negatively impact the performance of the virtual machines or environment. Okay, if that's okay, Nandish, I'll just keep it for Q&A section. Okay, we'll just answer this. So there was one question here about the upgrade cycles of Horizon components. Okay, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to continue with this day 2 operations. I did mention the, I suppose, 3-stage process of patching or of implementing the change. When it comes to the, let's say, preparing the image itself, and normally, maybe I'll start from Windows patching, because that will be one of 2. So we normally have 2 types of activities when it comes to pushing new image. It will be either Windows patching or any other application change or patching. So when it comes to image, we usually follow Patch Tuesday cycles. So once the Patch Tuesday passes and the new patches are released by end of that week, we would already have image ready in our early adopters environment and push it to early adopters and have it run for a couple of days, up to a week. And then just gather feedback, plus some of our IT team, internal IT team would also use those desktops to provide feedback. If everything is thumbs up, we're ready to go, we would quickly push it to UAT just to make sure we didn't miss anything, and then start pushing into into production. In the past, we used to take downtimes, and we did such upgrades as weekend activities. We don't anymore. At this stage, being mostly instant clone, we actually schedule those upgrades midweek. So we just schedule activity on user logoff. So, and then we give it a week or two for this image to apply on to all virtual machines. Usually it's a week, sometimes it's two, depending on the business unit using the pool. And after that time, we would just kick out remaining sessions during weekend. So what that helps us achieve is we don't have to wait for that maybe narrow maintenance window to squeeze maybe image push to large number of virtual machines or pools. That takes a lot of stress from the IT admin as well, because we can literally do it during our shift. Second type of upgrade is the application update, right? So it can go at the same cycle as Windows patching if the application is part of the image. A lot of our applications are not part of the image. They're actually packaged using app volumes. So in that scenario, we, on the site, we would just do all the testing and sign off. And when it's ready, we would just assign new app stack. Let's say maybe on Friday, colleagues are using old app stack, old application package. So usually throughout weekend, or maybe lasting on Friday, we would assign new package. So on Monday, when the colleagues start their work or start their week and start logging in, they will start getting the new application. So it's kind of, we found it the easiest. There's many ways you can do it, but we just found that this is the easiest. And that would be the other way of doing it. So replace the application used here. Other things like data backup. So this may actually interest you. We still use desktops and documents with folder redirection on our virtual machines, but it's very limited space. And we did it on purpose because all colleagues actually have OneDrive set up on their virtual machine, and they have much larger space available there. So we actually campaign every opportunity we have to remind our end users to use OneDrive. We do. And we encourage usage of OneDrive rather than any other locations. That achieves not only the capacity issue, but also it's an automated backup, right? So we don't have to worry about the backup. It's been taken care of, so to speak. And the data availability. So once you save it to OneDrive, you log off from your virtual machine. You can access it from your, let's say, even managed device, right? Mobile or any other enrolled device, wherever OneDrive is set up. So the ease of accessing that data on any device is just much better. Another interesting thing is actually fairly large portion of our work is actually, I suppose, cleanups and making sure that the environment is running optimally. So initially, when we rolled out certain products, maybe like DEM and app volumes, we were doing it by hand because the number of users using them weren't large. But as the adoption has grown over the years, now we're relying on cleanup scripts, where, for instance, writable volumes that haven't been attached for over 90 days or 180 days, depending on the business unit. We have different agreements with different business units. They're going to be automatically deleted. So the assumption is, if you haven't used your writable volume for a period of time, it's safe to say, that the data is stale and it's not needed anymore. We can safely delete it. And if you wish to come back in some time and use this virtual machine, you're just going to get a new writable volume. And we use the same type of cleanup activities for DM profiles. So let's say we can take certain assumptions. If colleague haven't logged into their virtual machines for maybe 12 months, it's fair to say that they probably don't remember what the settings were after 12 months. So even if we delete them, it's not going to be end of the world, right? It's still reasonable. So, and this way, we manage to keep the environments clean and maintain it for, let's say, what we call active users, right? And give in an extra buffer for returning users as well. Okay, I'm just looking at Q&A here. No questions so far. Very good. Interesting part of data operations is actually user education for us. So we found that by explaining certain things to your end users and maybe meeting once a quarter for maybe 30-minute refresher helps us as IT admins not to receive that many simple calls, if I can call them this way, because very often colleagues can actually fix it themselves by simply logging off and logging back in a couple of minutes. Sometimes, especially if you're new, the technology may be new for you as well, and you may not be just sure if, is it worth it or not. So we have small campaigns, when we call them road shows, where we meet maybe once a quarter, and we would go through a list of best practices, what to do, what not to do, and also provide a few internal articles, FAQs, and also we do a lot of instructional videos where we basically take colleagues step by step through a series of actions to fix something or make an adjustment to their virtual machine config or maybe a client config. And by doing this, and by increasing the user awareness, we actually managed to reduce the number of tickets we're getting for simple things like I can't log in, my virtual machine is slow, and so on and so forward. And also, things like, my files are missing, for instance. Sometimes people are not sure where to save their files, right? So again, just, increasing that awareness, what's good to do, and, what maybe is better avoid, makes a whole world of a difference. And what you see here on the slide is a screenshot from one of the slides of that colleague training, right? So it's very simplistic, right? We wanted to keep it really simple for the purpose of this this presentation, but it just gives you an idea, right? That there are simple things, but if you remember about them, it really makes a difference. Right. So with that, I'm actually going to jump to some lessons learned. So I suppose everything you heard so far, and then we learned a lot, by running the infrastructure for so long, right? So all those slides you see how we set it up, right? The user experience. These are all the outcomes of our lessons learned very often, right? And this is kind of the the snapshot of it all. We found that by focusing on user experience, it's much easier to make any type of change in your environment, because you automatically have kind of buy-in from end users. By delivering good experience, people are happy to use the product. No one wants to use a product that doesn't work well, and it just make their daily work more difficult, right? But it's not only what you see on the screen, but also part of what we consider user experience is their perception of us as IT. So we actually have an open dialogue with most business units. So we're not just, we're trying to interact with our colleagues through those awareness campaigns, right? And kind of advocate for the service. And this helps not only with reducing the number of tickets we see with, let's say, simple issues, but also builds a relationship with our user base. So it may be a reverse situation where now we want to implement a change, maybe an OS upgrade, and we don't get that much pushback because those BUs actually know us, that they trust us, that they're willing to do a UAT quickly, and then they know that we kind of work in their behalf. We're going to make sure that their experience is as good as possible. So it's kind of mutual. Another lessons learned for us was use of software-defined data centers. So in all our Horizon deployments, we use full SDDC stack. So we have vSAN, we have NSX, and we just found this just makes our life easier from IT admin perspective. We used to be in older designs when we were relying on external storage. This design is just much simpler. One other learning is actually business processes. So we found that sometimes the business processes, I mean placing the order and then going through the whole finance/procurement process, may be a lengthy process. And some of the deployments we did took longer than we initially anticipated, just not because the IT admin took longer to deploy Horizon environment, but the process, the financial process. So this is something I always say, keep in mind, especially if you're on kind of very narrow timeline, to make sure that you consider it. And especially now we've been through, you know, hardware shortages and so on, right? When it comes to optimization, on the top right corner, what we found that the key to your Horizon deployment success is optimizing the image. So this is the first thing that your end users will see. What's your login time, right? And once the VM logs in, is it kind of laggy, or is it quick? Is it responsive? So spending some time here to optimize the image it's critical. Our main tool we use for optimizing our images is the OS optimization tool by VMware. So on top of it, we'll have a few additional scripts just to adjust registries to, let's say, to the user experience where we want to achieve. Maybe, you know, disable some pop-ups, but 90% plus the core is done by OS optimization tool. Another thing I mentioned in the past is you know, having a stage or early adopters environment. We found this is really helpful. There may be situations, you know, that you want to, it's good to always test your upgrades in, you know, some other lower environment before you go to production, right? So we always do that, and it builds the confidence, and also helps avoid any unexpected situations, and then your maintenance window, you know, extends. One other thing is we found that with real-time application delivery, which for us is up volumes, we were able to deliver some of the applications much quicker and easier. So even the application lifecycle became simpler, where we can have even, you know, different versions of software running, right? Maybe not on the same VM, right? But we can to a group of colleagues based maybe on their security group membership, we can assign different version of software, and to the other a different version of software. Or in general, replacing a software newer version, you can nearly do it on the fly, where whenever you have new version available, you can just set it so on next user login, they're just going to get it. And that helps with managing applications in general centrally. We do the same when it comes to user environment manager and user settings. So as you can see, again, this takes us back to the slide about replicating all user settings in the DFS namespace. So regardless where colleagues go, they always get the same look and feel. They always get their settings. So from one perspective, user experience is very good. From our point of view as IT admin, there's less chance of any configuration inconsistencies between different environments. For instance, if you had multiple DEM shares, chances are, you know, you're going to make slightly different, you know, configuration changes between the environments. You know, maybe, you know, untick one extra option, or, you know, and that may make a small difference, right? But still, with having everything centrally, it's just, you know, you do it once and it applies. So there is no way to go wrong. And the last one is using OneDrive. So cloud-based storage for us is actually OneDrive. So just like I mentioned before, we always advocate for this to our colleagues, because it not only makes files available anywhere, as long as you can access your OneDrive, right? But it's also an automatic backup for us. So it just makes our life as an IT person simpler. Right. With that, I'm just going to pause here. So I'm just going to show you one more slide. And while you see that slide, we can just go through Q&A questions. So we have still plenty of time. So anything that was covered or you would like to hear that relates to Horizon, you're more than welcome to just shoot that question in the Q&A field, and I'll try to answer. While you start typing your questions, I'm just going to mention a few words about VMware and VMware program. So this is our internal program where IT practitioners from within the VMware supporting different products are talking to you, customers, about how we run things internally. So a few interesting blog posts can be found on those links. There's IT report here, and again, any VMware product or beyond, if you would like to talk to a practitioner, it may be worth talking to your TAM, and just they can reach out to VMware and VMware team and check if we have a professional that can talk to you how we run things internally. Okay. With that, I just jump to some of the questions. Okay, so Nandish, you had a question about the ideal logic or steps for Horizon components upgrade, starting from Horizon client to up volume upgrade. So, okay, I'll try to cover the whole upgrade process, at least how we do it, right? And then if you have further questions, you can just post it here. So in general, what we would do is we would start from upgrading the server side. So we would start from Horizon server, and depending on the size of environment, we would do up volumes the same weekend or maybe a following weekend. So usually it would be a Horizon server, then up volumes. And this is really the ones that, that are more complicated. Any other, like for instance, DM, it's only the agent running on the virtual machine. So you can make an adjustment anytime you feel you're ready, right? When it comes to the virtual machine side, so obviously there's backwards compatibility between versions. So let's say if you're maybe on 22.12 version of Horizon and you're considering maybe 23.06 is out now, right? So there's going to be backwards compatibility. So those VMs will run just fine, but we tend not to leave it too long. So maybe with next Windows patching, we would just include Horizon agent as well and upgrade those agents as well. And if there was up volumes agent upgraded or up volumes server upgrade at the same time, we would upgrade those agents too. Any other agent, we would go through the upgrade, would kind of push in the same manner. When it comes to Horizon client, we would normally, so sometimes what you'll find is, Horizon clients are available to download sooner than your upgrade cycle for your server backend infrastructure, maybe, right? And that often happens, and generally it's okay. So we try, normally what we do, at least for managed devices, we would push a matching version of Horizon client to manage devices. So let's say if we were to roll out, let's say maybe 23.06, right? So using Workspace ONE UEM, we would push the matching version of Horizon client to our managed devices, right? Obviously, what we can't manage, it kind of goes its own cycle. The only thing what we would do for non-managed devices is we usually do like a report once a month where we look at the versions of Horizon client that are connecting to our environments. And if we find a group of users that maybe are far behind the current version, we would send them like a friendly reminder or email with instructions saying, hey, by the way, we noticed that you're far behind with your Horizon client version. That may negatively impact your user experience. So upgrade to latest, you may actually, it may be just, your VM will feel like it's running smoother, right? Because, there's some improvements and changes made between the versions of the client. And that's about it. That's the only thing we can do. And in general, that works. So I hope this answers your question. Yeah.
Well, we'll just give it another minute and just see if any other questions come in. We've just had one more come in, Bart. So what is the recommended version preferred for components? Is it N version or N-1?
You see, so that may really, there isn't wrong answer, right? It really depends what you as an IT decided to be, right? So for us, up to not long ago, we tend to do N-1, but now we, as much as possible, we'll try to be N. So, and really depends on the mandate from your maybe IT leadership. The reason why we changed from N-1 to N1 is we're more and more involved, more closely involved in conversations with our product team. And our product team, they want to hear the feedback as soon as the product is out, right? Because that's very valuable to them. So that's why we want to keep up with the versions. But let's say there may be in your organization maybe situation, okay, you may have limited staff, so keeping up to date, especially now with releases being so often, may not be sustainable, right? Because you'll be just going from upgrade to upgrade to upgrade. That there may be other reasons, right? So depending on this, you may say, oh, I'm fine with N-1 or even more, or I'll keep N-1 or N-2 unless there's some security patch that needs to be applied, and then I'm just going to update to that, right? So it is a really decision you have to make internally, right, based on your staffing, right? And suppose sometimes it's also a question of, with new versions, new features are being introduced, right? So how quickly you want those features to be available to you, right? Like for instance, since maybe there's been a lot of work done into the blast protocol in the recent versions of Horizon, right? So if you're maybe on the older version of Horizon, like 8.6 or before, and now you jump to the latest, you may see benefits there, right? So I suppose it really depends, right? That would be the answer.
Great, thank you. We've got a couple more questions.
Okay, awesome. So next question from Joe is, if you're using FS Logics for Office 365, why not use it for user profile container also? Okay, so there's actually a reason for it. FS Logics containers, they don't have a console, right? So you can't really manage them centrally as you would with writables. It's practically just on your SIF share, right? So then, it's just, from that point of view, it's just harder, right? And also, if it's probably one of the main considerations for us, So we found that we don't want to have a dependency of the whole profile. That if you look from the support perspective, right, and you need to maybe recover something or access those files, it's just it's just harder to work with VHDs rather than maybe with writables. So we tend to rely on different technologies than the profile. We have a use case for a profile container. It's not much. It's only one business unit, and it is a very specific use case, probably just a couple of hundred people. So I'm not saying that it's not a valid use case, but it really has to, again, suit your support model, right? So you may find that if you are using writables because you have access to one console, so you can maybe much quicker address certain issues if you had to do it nearly by hand, accessing the share, right? And that may have, if you look at scale and the size of your environment is growing, that may be, the winning point, right? The decider, right? In our case, we have a fairly substantial number of end users, right? And a large number of FSLogix containers. So I suppose the less dependency on them, and then it's actually better, That's why we kind of have a split between writables and FSLogix Office container.
Great, thanks, Bart. Next one we have, do we have any best practices for Dynamic Environment Manager upgrades, specifically versions 2103 to 2306?
Usually we just go by, whatever's publicly available and, release notes, right? Or any KBs. With DM itself, it's usually a very straightforward process. It's literally just upgrading the agent, right, on the virtual machines. So not that I'm aware of, right? But let's say if we were going through the same process, we would always maybe check, tech zone and any VMware KBs just to make sure that we didn't miss anything, right? In case there may be some default setting that, let's say, was enabled and is going to be disabled with different versions, if this is your concern, right? So if you're still not sure, again, you can probably just log like a proactive ticket with our global support to answer this question. But nothing comes to mind as of now. Usually it's a straightforward process.
Great, thank you. The next one we have asks around VMware tools. So can this now be updated without touching the agent?
If I remember correctly, I think yes. But then again, I think it started maybe 1 or 2 versions before, right? I think there's a KB article for it, so I would reference you to double check this, right? Not trust my word, right? But you're right. I think from one of the latest versions you can do it. Having said that, what we do internally is still kind of, I would call it the old-fashioned way, where when we upgrade, especially VM tools, we literally just strip all the agents and then install from scratch, because and it's just kind of what we learned ourselves. So if you did that and it should work, right? It should just work. But normally, if there are some strange problems you're having, the very first ask from our support most likely will be to reinstall the agents, right? Just to roll out any potential like stale registry that stayed behind, right? Just to keep the image clean. And just to add on that, we actually have we're using a lot of scripts to automate the install process for us. So from our point of view, it doesn't really cost us much. We just basically add it to our sequence in the right order, and it just runs through the sequence. But yeah, I think you can do it now. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Bart. The next one we have, do you have any experience around any complicated component upgrades in our Horizon portfolio?
You have to define complicated. So yeah, you have to be more specific, right? So
so like the Workspace ONE Access upgrade.
Okay, so you see Workspace ONE Access. So it's not really a component of Horizon as such. Okay, there is an integration for single sign-on, right? But there isn't really that much in it, right? They're practically independent. You just point your Horizon instance to a Workspace ONE instance, and then in Workspace ONE you just set up the kind of the opposite, right? And that's done, right? When it comes to interoperability, right? So again, if we were to go through an upgrade, right, we would just check the matrix and make sure that, let's say, if you're on very old version of connector, right, you want to make sure that this is supported, right? Or it's not going to break your SSO, right?
Great, thank you. And the last one that we have, what we're using to generate user client activity reports, such as tracking client versions.
Okay, so there's actually 2 things you can do. I mean, I think now even 3. So in the past, we were using Universal Console. I think there's a report there. In point of time, you can actually use Horizon Admin Console. And I believe the ARIA operations for Horizon also should give you some report. So usually ARIA for operations, it gives you trends, right, and more info. Any other tool will be most likely point in time, right? But this tends to be even enough, right? Because what you do is we know the peak usage for us is Wednesdays, right? So if we maybe, and most people actually, they don't log off every day, so they would, they log their session. So as long as the session is disconnected, but the client is actually running, we're going to get the version. So maybe you can probably, if you're not familiar with VR ops or Horizon VMware area operations for Horizon, then you can do it this way as well. And you may have to go through maybe 2 or 3 rounds, but eventually you probably you're going to achieve your goal as well.
Great, thanks, Bart. And I think that covers all of the open questions. I'll just give it a few more seconds to see if anything comes in. Okay, I think we are done for today. Bart, thank you so much for your presentation. It's always insightful to hear how we at VMware are using our own technology.
Sure, happy to be here.
And thanks to everyone who joined. As we mentioned at the beginning, this presentation has been recorded and your TAM will be able to make the recording available to you. Please join us next month when we're going to be hearing all about our Oracle Cloud VMware solution. We look forward to seeing you then. Thanks, everyone.